Yes, welcome along to the Kildare Nationalist Sports Podcast, the short of course, looking at all the ups and downs of Kildare sport with a particular focus on GAA. And unfortunately, down is probably the word of the week, despite some good performances midweek from underage teams and different things. But unfortunately, the headline news this week is undoubtedly the relegation of the Kildare Senior Footballers back to Division 3 after just one season in Division 2. So joining me to pick the bones out of that defeat against Louth and indeed the league season in 2026 is Richard Commons and Seamus Dillon. Richard, I know you are a busy man and you might have to hop off, but hopefully we'll have time to get your full thoughts on what was ultimately a really disappointing afternoon in Cedar St. Conleth's Park. We came in probably hoping against hope a little bit that there'll be some salvation for Kildare in that final round against Louth, but it wasn't to be. And in the end, that 125 to 25 point defeat was enough to send Kildare back to Division 3.
Yeah, it was disappointing. I think at least there was an improvement in performance from the previous two games against Meath and Cork. A bit more intensity about it. But I don't think you can really argue, Louth were the better team, and this is a Louth team that we're missing, some key players. They were missing Conor Grimes, Craig Lennon, who's done so much damage to us in the past, Ryan Burns, etc., etc. I think they had 9 players out and could only name 24 on their match day panel. But what they've got is a system of play under Gavin Devlin, and it's consistent. It's producing results, and the players seem to have bought into it and know what they're doing. So yeah, I think Louth were clearly the stronger team, and once they pulled away towards the end of the first half with that glut of scores that they got, I don't think there was ever really a sense that Kildare were going to come back into it. I think if you want to look for positives out of it, I think Jack Robinson was the key positive. But the positives were few and far between, I think, from the whole league campaign. And I don't think you can argue, when you get relegated with 5 defeats in a row, I don't think you can say you're unlucky or anything like that. We lost. We mentioned it last week. I think we lost the game we really needed to win, as it turned out, and as we thought at the time, which was the Cavan game. And we never really showed up on that particular day. So, there's a lot of things for Kildare to fix. I think a lot of the current situation is around the quality of player we had, and I know it's not something maybe people want to accept, but I said it around the time of the Meath game. They have better players than us at the moment, and a few other teams do as well. And hopefully that will improve as the players get a little bit more older and experienced, and a few more come through. But I think in general we are a kind of somewhere around 14 to 18 in terms of teams in Ireland, and that puts you at the bottom of Division 2 or towards the top of Division 3, and we just have to be realistic about that, I think, at the moment.
Yeah, Seamus, if we go right back to the O'Byrne Cup final against Westmeath, when Ronan Wallace and Luke Loughlin kind of ran riot from around the 2-point line, there was concerns then defensively about what was going to be a really inexperienced and youthful Kildare backline going into the National League, and ultimately those fears were justified. Kildare conceded 131 against Cork, and then, although there was a slight improvement, it was still 125 conceded against Louth. Kildare conceded more 2-pointers than any other team across the 4 divisions by a distance, I believe, and the only side to concede more than 1 2-pointer in every single game. So defensively, Kildare did have struggles in a couple of games up front, but really it's in defence where Kildare have been struggled and where they've come undone in this National League campaign. And again, that's not to pick out the players who are actually playing in defence, because a lot of them were young players playing in their first National League campaign at senior level, so it was always going to be a big ask. But yeah, that really has been the kind of Kildare's Achilles heel throughout the league season.
Yeah, I know we probably spoke about it last week, and it continues to be a point of concern going forward and looking back, because coming out of the back end of last year was the concern that how many lads had stepped away from the fray, and the likes of David Hyland. They've all been well documented, the guys, the Mick O'Grady's and lads like that, Tony Archibalds, who had stepped away from the fray after that. There was probably worrying signs against Dublin in that Burn Cup game in Newbridge, and then I suppose a fault that we spoke about was, maybe having teams nearly killed off and letting them back into the game, and that was Westmeath in the Hurling Cup final. But all along, we had our concerns, I suppose, defensively, and because when you talk about experience, we waited till probably the very last day to get somebody like Mark Dempsey into the fray, and his performance for 40 odd minutes or 50 odd minutes the last day was just massive. Brought a bit of leadership, brought a sense of control around that full back line and half back line, and certainly something that we've been missing probably the whole way through. But yeah, look at Jerry, we've spoken about that backs as a unit that lack that bit of experience, and the younger lads coming in, and look at, you get relegated to Division 3, there has to be a certain element of sympathy, I suppose, towards those younger lads, because they were asked to carry a lot from the word go, and I suppose you can be critical and overcritical at times of the performances, but when you slip out a couple of experienced guys out of the fray, and you lose that bit of composure and, I suppose, help for those younger lads, it becomes a tough burden on them. And as I said to you, when you go back and look at Mark Dempsey coming in last week, Jack Robinson, as Richard said, his performance was so good, when he came in, and he had that bit of experience. He's been away, he played with New York, he's been around Kildare panels before. So look, it's disappointing. There's a lot of work going to have to go on. I think that come club championship, well, it'll be Leinster Championship first, but even looking forward to next year, I think there's going to have to be a lot of work done in the background to maybe have a look at trying to find an extra couple of defenders and forwards for that matter as well, and try and build on that going forward. But it's going to be a big Leinster campaign and Sam Maguire campaign coming up, because the pressure is now on Kildare.
Yeah, Richard, I said a couple of weeks ago on one of the podcasts that kind of a manager lives and dies by his selections and which players he picks over others. And it was hard to watch that game on Sunday without the mind drifting to a couple of players, more than a couple maybe, who weren't involved in the squad. And Tommy Callaghan put that question kind of to Brian Flanagan after the game, and Brian Flanagan said that players who maybe haven't been involved in this squad were involved in previous squads that were relegated as well. So it's not just as simple as saying A, B, and C, is going to rectify Kildare. There's certainly no one individual player out there that was going to turn Kildare around, but there were a couple of players, off the squad that the mind was drifting to, and again, without kind of beating an old drum, the likes of Aaron Masters and Kevin O'Callaghan, they surely could have added something to this Kildare team, not just on Sunday, but right throughout the league campaign. Because when you look at it, really last Sunday in the squad that were fit and available with the injury to Kevin Feely, there's probably only one natural midfielder in that squad, and Brendan Gibbons was on the bench, as he has been the previous week against Cork as well, before his introduction in the second half. Like, there was Brian McLaughlin was experimented out there, and I would say probably Brian is in Kildare's top 3 performers in the National League so far this season. I thought he was very good in a lot of the games, but a central midfielder, I don't think that's his position. So to be so light in such a key area of the field going into such an important game, again, I suppose you have to go back to the selection of the squad right back to the start of the year. And wing back is another position. Ben McCormick played out of wing back, out of position at wing back. There's a number of players not on the panel this year for a variety of reasons, and not all of them are just selection issues. And we're not privy to, I suppose, the private conversations that go on between players and managers, and often there's reasons that we aren't aware of that sees people drop out of the squad. But yeah, ultimately, that's, I suppose, do we have the right balance throughout the squad in terms of even just numbers in different positions?
Yeah, I think it's clear we don't have the right balance. I'd be comfortable enough, reasonably comfortable with the forward division in terms of what's available if they're all fit. But getting them all fit at the same time seems to be quite a challenge. And now we've got, Colm Dalton's, gone off injured. Jimmy Hyland's still injured. So, you can't necessarily guarantee that your best 6 forwards are going to be available at any point in time. But midfield, defence, goalkeeper to a degree, although, kickouts are an issue. I'm not sure how much of that is down to the goalkeeper. Some of it probably is. But I think Keane Burke has been excellent under a high ball, for example, and, hasn't been particularly poor or anything in terms of the basics of goalkeeping. But yeah, and I think it's hard to know, as you say, it's hard to know who stepped away because they weren't guaranteed. Well, I won't say guaranteed, but they weren't expecting to get game time, or they were disappointed with their game time last year and couldn't see how that would improve. Like some of the players that you've mentioned there are probably in that particular boat. You know, Aaron Masterson for a number of years has been kind of substitute third midfielder, if you like. You've Paddy McDermott wasn't really playing much last year, and we don't know really how much of that was down to fitness or form, or you know, maybe you know he just didn't fit in Brian Flanagan's plans. So you can make a case for, and then you know 4 guys retire for various different reasons, mainly because they've been you know on the treadmill for a long time, and you've got Hilo with his medical situation. So it's just it's an unfortunate sequence of circumstances, I suppose, in a way. And you know, who are these players that can come in and you know have the experience to turn it around in defence? I guess you're talking about you know maybe you know Darren Malone from Alan Wood, you know maybe you're talking about you know Ryan Houlihan. You know, I'm not sure what Ryan's fitness is like at the moment, but there's not a lot of obvious ones out there unless you're going back to you know cap in hand to a Mick O'Grady or asking Dave Hyland to put his health at risk. You know, so I have a certain amount of sympathy for Brian Flanagan from a personnel perspective, and I would take his point that you know 2 years ago we went down from Division 2 with most of those players involved and didn't win a game, whereas at least we picked up 3 points this time. So you could argue we're with what we have. So you know, I don't really know who he would bring in defensively that would make that much difference. Maybe a Tony Archibald, a Paddy McDermott. You know, some of those guys could add a bit of experience to it. Maybe you know, if Darren Malone was available from Alan Wood, he could come in as a kind of centre back. You know, but again, he's someone who didn't necessarily play on a regular basis when he was available before, but he probably has improved in the meantime. But I think, you know, his personnel is one thing, but I think the bigger issue I'd have almost is with kind of the tactics and the structure defensively, that, you know, you've got all these defensive coaches on the sideline. And, you know, yes, there was a little bit of an improvement there on Sunday, but I think we're still very weak. You alluded to the stat around 2-pointers. We're very weak at closing down. You know, there was some more examples of it, of you know, just lazy one-handed tackles going in. Not so much on Sunday, but it was still definitely there. So I think it's a combination of if they could find 1 or 2 players out there outside the panel at the moment that would be willing and able to come in and would provide that little bit of leadership, then I think that would be a huge benefit. But you know, I suspect there's not many of those out there that could come in at this point.
Yeah, Seamus, the other theme of the year really centres around injuries. And Brian Flanagan made the point that there are other sides who are suffering just as badly as Kildare. And I suppose just to take Louth as a point, they obviously were missing a number of players, as Richard noted earlier on, and they had 2 defenders taken off inside the opening 10 minutes due to injuries during Sunday's game. But, you know, I suppose we're only looking at Kildare's point of view. And right from the very first week that Kildare got back, there was words that there was a huge chunk of the squad suffering from different injuries, a lot of them hangovers from last season. But I suppose we always felt that gradually those injuries would clear up, and coming to the end of the league season that we would have something resembling a full-strength squad. But, you know, there it was on Sunday. We had 4 players taken off with what it looked to be injuries, and poor Expelant, to his full credit, soldiered on and battled on, even though when he was quite clearly injured, and had there been subs available, he would have been taken off with 15 or 20 minutes to go. So, you know, there's 5 players in a crunch game leaving the field, or would have left the field anyway, with injuries. We're now looking in, what, a 3 or 4 week gap now into the Leinster Championship. A lot of those guys, again, are going to be kind of rehabbing rather than tuning up now, heading towards the championship. And it's far from ideal. It's, you know, and I don't suppose anybody really would say that it is, but and I'm sure Brian Flanagan and all involved in the management team are, you know, second checking everything and second guessing everything, and you know, there's nobody calling into question the work that is done behind the scenes. Maybe Kildare are just unlucky, but it does seem to be an awful lot of injuries, and any team who is struggling to put their players on the field and struggling to put them on the field at 100% is always going to struggle.
Yeah, and I suppose, again, going back, but because I think it was so evident the night of that Westmeath game, when you talked about injuries, Jerry, I think that particular night, when you saw the faces that came out of the dressing room, the Jack Robinsons, Ben McCormick's, Jimmy Hyland, there was Colin Dalton, all forwards. I think there was 6. Ryan Sinke, there were 6 probably starting forwards that were knocking around there, all of them with injuries, and most of them with hamstring trouble. Colin Dalton, I think maybe did I mention him, another one, and they were all away from the panel. I think Sinke maybe got a couple of minutes against Tyrone of those 6, but the injuries have come. Derek Kerwin was another one. The injuries have come, injuries have gone, but injuries keep returning, and that's probably the biggest worry that you would have, as you said, heading towards the Leinster Championship at this stage. And it has to be a problem. It has to be tough on a management team when you're out there Tuesday and Thursday night and trying to get guys through rehab programs to get them back on the field. And it's a massive problem. It has been a massive problem, and it's probably all leads to the strength and depth of your panel then, and heading to that Leinster Championship. But I suppose you have to ask the question. I know you and I, Jared, we've spoke off air and stuff at times about, and I'm not comparing notes, but I mean, if you look at the hurlers, I think throughout the Walsh Cup and the National League, the only hamstring injury was, I think, to Darren Melville, and Cathal Dowling had picked up an injury since that. But apart from 1 or 2 long-term ones, they've just been lucky, I suppose, in the sense that they've been coming away with less injuries, and gives somebody like Brian Dowling an opportunity to pick from a close enough to full panel. But yeah, it's certainly a problem for the footballers from that point of view, in the sense that struggling to get a full team on the pitch, and having so many guys who are coming back for bits of games and then crying off again. So yeah, from that point of view, it's worrying, I suppose, is the main thing. It's worrying.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Richard, as we look at the final table there, obviously Kildare and Offaly, the 2 sides below that line, that relegation line. How big of a setback is this now for, I suppose, the squad, on one hand, but also Brian Flanagan? Because I suppose if he is to see out the full duration of his 4-year term, it would mean that he can't play Division 1 football without an extension to that term. Obviously, down to Division 3 in his 3rd year. At best, he'll be in Division 2 then during his 4th year. So how big a setback is that? And, is there any positives to be taken maybe that this still overall our young squad will maybe go back to a level of football that perhaps will suit them a little bit better in the stage of this development, or is that just clutching at straws?
I think it is a big setback. I think you could tell, even, to be fair to him, he gave us something like 13 minutes of an interview afterwards, straight after the game the other night. So, and you could tell he was hugely disappointed himself with it, and saw it as a setback in the short term, is how he put it. I think it certainly damages his 4-year plan. I'm sure it wasn't part of the plan, and it's almost in a way back to square one. In terms of status, at least. I think, yes, in theory, next year those younger players can, get more experience in a less rarefied atmosphere. But I think having seen them operate in Division 2, and for those guys to have experienced Division 2 and then take a step back to Division 3 level, I'm not sure they're going to learn as much as they would have done in a 2nd year at Division 2 level. So I think it is clutching a little bit at straws. I think also Division 3 looks kind of horrible next year, in the sense of there's so many local Leinster derbies and teams that love putting one over on Kildare. I'm thinking of Joe Murphy facing us with Carlow, for example. Obviously Laois are still there, Offaly are there, Westmeath are there. Like, that's a tough division, not even mentioning Clare and Sligo, who give us trouble every time we play them as well. So it's not by any means a slam dunk that we're going to come out of Division 3 either. So that would leave, in year 4, we'd still be in Division 3, year 4 of Flano's reign. Obviously there's Tailteann Cup, next year as well, unless we get to a Leinster final. So it's a huge setback in terms of the standard of football that these players are going to be getting. And I don't think we can get away from that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, just to finally wrap it up down with the senior footballers, Seamus, we're going to take a bit of a break from the podcast over the next couple of weeks, but we'll be back in time for the Leinster Championship, which is on the weekend, both for the hurlers and footballers for the senior men in Kildare on the weekend of the 18th and 19th of April. So Kildare will go away. They have that length of time now to prepare. Obviously, Laois and Offaly will play between now and then, and the winners of that game will face off against Kildare in the championship. And whoever comes through that one, they'll obviously have the benefit of a championship game under their belts, where Kildare will have this long spell of inactivity in terms of real competitive games. So in some ways, Kildare might be the sitting ducks come that game, Seamus. Obviously, if it's Offaly, there was a huge championship game in Newbridge last year that Kildare just about came out on top by 1 point. Kildare had a bigger margin of victory this year in the league, but you'd imagine the championship game last year will be more indicative of what we might see if that is to be the case in a couple of weeks. But whoever comes through that one, it's going to be a tough one for Kildare, and there needs to be a lot of soul searching done, I suppose, between the management and indeed the players, and they have to try and come up with some of the answers for the problems that have been pretty evident throughout the league campaign. You're just on mute there, Seamus.
Right, sure. Yeah, sorry, I said, beg your pardon. That either Laois or Offaly are bring their own problems, I suppose, for the want of a better word, when they come to Newbridge. And Kildare have struggled, as you said, against Offaly last year, and Laois beating us in Tullamore, was it 2 years ago? So look, there's no given that Kildare will step into a game of that magnitude and with such importance, because building as you're trying to do and get into a Leinster semi-final. But I'd certainly be hoping that, you know, this week down, that Kildare will probably have had to try and get some injuries sorted. You know, Offaly will come to Newbridge if it's them, with some bodies coming back on board, you know, guys who've been injured, and their panel seems to be strengthening over the week. So and you saw that probably against Cavan, you know, as poor as our performance was, like Offaly did really step up to the mark, and we're very unfortunate probably with a last minute goal. So yeah, it's going to be a big game for Kildare. But it's all about getting the bodies on the field, getting the bodies right, and getting the heads right. I still think there's more in them. I was disappointed probably in Sunday, in the sense that I thought the urgency and the work rate and everything else was probably a lot better in the second half than it was in the first half, and we gave ourselves a chance. But I think if you can bring that for a full 70 minutes, but no, you wouldn't be taking either of Offaly or Laois for granted, in the sense that I don't think we're in a position. We're not able to, as Richard said, it's a local Leinster derby. The Laois or the Offaly supporters would love nothing more than getting a win over Kildare, because we just have that I suppose expectation from our own supporters. But it'll be a big game in Kildare's future, no more than it will be for in the present of that particular evening of the 19th of April. So yeah, it's a tough one, but hopefully we can see it through.
Yeah, well, absolutely. We'll be looking forward to that game in much more detail in the coming weeks, but obviously a lot of work to be done on the training ground between now and then for the Kildare senior football team to try and get a bit of momentum back into things again, and looking forward to that championship. But yeah, unfortunately, there's no getting out of it. We're back to Division 3 for next year, and as Richard was saying there, it feels almost like a Leinster B championship there, with it's 5 or 6 Leinster opponents, as well as Clare and Sligo in there. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of local derbies next year, and Kildare will have a big target on the back there for some of them as well. So well, that's all for next year, but we've got a lot to get through, as we said, before the end of the season for the senior men. But we're going to stick with football now and just switch over to the ladies, because last weekend as well, Kildare, for the second time this season, the Pat Sullivan's team went to Munster and were sickened by a last gasp score. It was a draw earlier on in the opening round when Cork got a free against Kildare to get a draw in the opening round. Waterford snatched the draw in Dungarvan with a goal, and even more dramatic circumstances late on Saturday evening, wasn't it? Really disappointing for the Kildare side. It would have been a real boost going into the final round. But Richard, I suppose in many ways, it probably doesn't alter Kildare's task too much on Sunday. Kildare still need a result against Kerry. Looking at the results elsewhere, as you can see there from the league table, even if Kildare had have won that game against Waterford, they still would have needed to, at the very least, have drawn that game. They don't have the advantage of needing a draw now, but they still would have needed a result of some sort. And now it's pretty simple. They have to go and win that game against Kerry and potentially leapfrog Kerry and move out of those relegation positions.
Yeah, and that's probably something you'd have taken a match or two ago, a final game, chance to win it and save yourself effectively. So it's going to be a big occasion, I think. Obviously, we played Kerry in the quarter-final last year, put up a good show. So we know kind of all about them. Kerry have lost, as you see on the table there, have lost 4 of their 6 games. So, they're not exactly flying at the moment either. They'll bring, a lot of experience, though, to this one, and you'll expect them to raise their game. So it's going to be a tough game, I think, for Kildare. But, they've been highly competitive. Like Waterford, you see them there, 3rd in the table on 10 points. Tough team to beat. I know we said even last week they'd lost their most recent 2 games after winning the first 3, but for Kildare to lead them the whole way and then get sucker punched like that was disappointing. But again, another good performance from Kildare, so they certainly have it in them, I think, to put it up to Kerry based on the performances to date, and maybe home advantage can help swing it their way.
Yeah, Seamus, if you look at the top of the table, Cork have won 5, drawn 1. That draw against Kildare in the opening round, the only points that they've dropped, and really they were very, very lucky. I won't say very, very lucky, but very, very pleased to get out of there with a draw, having been behind for most of that game as well. And very fine margins. Like Kildare held on for a win there against Cork and held on for a win against Waterford. Kildare could be on 9 points and, be up in that upper half of the table. And maybe that will be more reflective of Kildare's performances because, as Richard has said, they've been very, very competitive in a lot of the games, but there's an awful lot of ifs in those sentences as well. I mean, they didn't quite get over the finish line, and that's the facts of it. And they find themselves in the position that they're in now, going into that final game on Sunday against Kerry.
Yeah, how big it's a massive game, because I suppose the fact that Pat Sullivan maybe ripped up the script at the start of the year, and we spoke about this before. I suppose the panel was maybe decimated, for the want of a better word, but he backed his judgment. He went with his own picks and came out with a really good performance and an encouraging performance to get that point in Cork. And unlucky because it was a last minute free that Cork got to level it up, and then Waterford again. That was to lose out, didn't lose out, but not to get to 3 points there last weekend, has left them in a precarious position. And I suppose if you look at the table, the one team, as Richard said, from an experience point of view and what they'll probably bring, it's probably one of the toughest games you could have. But there's been a lot of positives with Kildare ladies this year, in fairness to them. Getting over Meath and putting up good performance. I suppose Galway was probably the toughest of them, but I just feel that from a growth point of view and where Kildare are and pushing forward to the future, to keep yourself in Division 1 is massive. So it's a big game on Sunday afternoon, and hopefully the crowd will get out and give them a little bit of support, because we could do with somebody staying up in the divisions as well as the hurlers for next year. But it's a tough game. But Pat Sullivan won't, he'll fancy his chances, especially at being in Hawkfield. It's a pitch that Kildare would be very familiar with. Kerry won't have been up there before, and the weather will probably play its part as well. But he'd be hoping. I think it's massive for them to get a result, because with the weekend that's in it, Meath, I'm not sure, is it Meath play Armagh in the last match? Don't have the fixtures in front of me.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they'll probably be hoping to get over it. The fact that if Kildare were to get a draw and Meath were to lose, I think that might still keep them up, Richard. So that's
head to head, unless Dublin win. Unless Dublin win, then it's a three-way. Although Dublin's scoring difference, looking at the table there, is way worse.
Yeah, it's poor.
But then Meath's is better. So I think they need to win to make sure.
Yeah, absolutely. But hopefully, it'll be a good evening for the ladies on Sunday.
Yeah, lastly, just on the ladies and Richard, I suppose the goals, we've been speaking about goals with the men, but the goals that they conceded against Waterford, one probably slightly unfortunate, but one really criminal, I suppose, for this level of football, to switch off and allow a free taker on the 20-metre line who looked like was going to tap over, and obviously that's what the defence said. In fairness, looking at the video, it appeared Kildare goalkeeper Rachel Fenham was screaming at a couple of defenders to come back onto the goal line, but they obviously didn't hear or weren't quite tuned in, and Waterford were able to get a quite easy goal. That's kind of something that I'm sure Kildare will learn from, and definitely won't do again. But then the equalising goal as well in the last minute was so unfortunate. It crashed down off the bar, and must have been only, unfortunately, there was a Russian linesman on the far side that was signalling that it wasn't a goal or anything. It hadn't crossed the line, but yeah, it must have only just about crossed the line. In fairness, the umpire was pretty quick to go to the flag, but it was very close indeed. And there's stuff that Kildare will have to just tighten up on now going into this big game.
Yeah, it's inexperience probably as well, isn't it? It's a bit like with the football, with the male men's team as well. Inexperience in defence maybe, but they'll learn from that hopefully. Going forward, these are the things you learn in Division 1, I think, or in the higher divisions, quicker than you learn in, say, a Division 3 in football, because those mistakes are punished quicker. So that's one of the key factors, I think, one of the key reasons to try and stay as high as you can in terms of division.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, hopefully Kildare, unlike the men last week, the ladies can find a way out in the national rounds to go in as the men did below the drop zone going into the final round, but still in their hands, and a victory and maybe even a draw would be enough to salvage Division 1 status for next year, and certainly over the duration of the league. I think that will be more than fair for Pat Sullivan's side, so the very best of luck to them on Sunday afternoon. We're going to stick with football, though, and move on to action during the week, because, of course, it's this time of year when the underage competitions really start to crank up, and both the Kildare minor and under-20 footballers were in action this week. We'll start with the under-20s there, who played, as we record this, last night on Wednesday evening in Wicklow. Richard and Seamus, you both were there. Kind of patchy enough performance from Kildare, but also some impressive stuff in flashes. They'll obviously have to and maybe have those flashes a little bit more consistently throughout the full duration of the game going forward to stiffer tests. But yeah, there was probably aspects that Kildare will look upon that they really have to improve on. But at the same time, as I said, Shane, there's probably some things there to be excited about as well.
Yeah, look, I suppose an opening day, an opening evening's game in any particular championship, I suppose it's hard to get up and running at full tilt, from the start. And Kildare were slow before the first point arrived, and dropped balls and some misdirected passes and stuff like that are just to be expected. But as you say, yeah, hitting 316 over the course of the hour. No disrespect to our neighbours in Wicklow, Kildare probably face much sterner tests over the next couple of weeks, and starting off with Offaly next week. But yeah, look, it's some good performances. The top end. Ryan in defence was really good, solid. Looks like he's filled out a bit, and his pace is, without question. It seemed like he picked up probably one of their danger men. The corner forward was pacey for them, so yeah, he was good. Liam Kelly at full back, right up through the field at centre back. Finn Dowland from Kilcock. I thought TJ Nolan and Rory Lawler, the two Lawrence's players, had really good games. And then Colin Moore did what he had to do before he left the fray with about 10 minutes to play. And as Ronan Kelly really stepped up to the mark with 2-4 frees, the points coming probably from frees. But yeah, some good individual performances. Kildare pacey, that's the one thing, and I don't know whether maybe the pitch in Antolker was probably a little bit on the tight side. I think you'll see a better Kildare performance again come next week. But yeah, it's encouraging. It's encouraging going forward, and we do have a good record at under 20 level, so you'll be hoping that'll can keep going.
Yeah, Richard, you were there as well. Ronan Kelly, he's obviously caught the eye for a tie during their run to the Leinster Championships. Scored 2 goals in one of those games. Was it up in Balticast? So he scored 2 goals. In Ockram, he scored the 2 goals in the Leinster Championship in one game. Like 2 goals there again last night. He's a forward that seems to have a lot. He's obviously one of the younger members of this panel as well. And I suppose there's a big difference between a lad who's just turned 18 or will at some stage this year playing on maybe a 20-year-old. But he's one of the younger crew, and he caught the eye. But who else did you think kind of shone on the night?
Yeah, I suppose similar to Seamus, I suppose the two that really stood out for me, apart from Ronan, were Ben Ryan and TJ Nolan. Both in a way because their things were kind of missing at a senior level. I suppose you're kind of watching out for, how can we improve things at senior level down the line. And, I thought Ben, as a kind of, he was in the full back line, kind of playing full back-ish, I think, for most of the game. I thought his pace, like his anticipation of the ball coming in and getting out in front of his man, was something that's been lacking a bit at the senior level over the last few weeks and over the league. So I think, it's hard not to think back to his dad and, look for traits that are there, but you can certainly see him, in terms of his footballing brain, and possibly has a bit more pace even than Glenn had. But his pass now to defence was very strong as well. So, you can certainly see him having a bright future for Kildare. And then TJ Nolan, I thought, was powerful around the middle. We were talking beforehand whether midfield was, the right position for him, but I think he certainly, justified his selection there. 4 good points. I did notice he was, in terms of Kildare didn't score any 2-pointers and maybe didn't need to. It's something we're very conscious of in Kildare at the moment. But he tended to drift towards the left side of the arc as they were attacking, ready for and available for 2-pointers. Didn't quite, come down to it at the end of the day. But I think he gave a very good option in terms of long range scoring. I thought actually the other one I'd call out Keane McKevitt. I thought had a very good game up and down the field. I think he gave the final pass for 2 of the goals, if I'm not mistaken. And the other one was Daniel Colbert, I thought, particularly in the first half. Very physical, strong runner with the ball. We know what he can do, from a hurling perspective as well. But I thought he had a very good game, a very good first half in particular, for us last night. So yeah, overall, very good, balanced kind of team. Plenty of talent there. You Jimmy Lynch coming off the bench as well to score a goal and a point. So you've got a little bit of a panel depth there. Joey Cunningham wasn't even available on the night either, who'd probably be, one of the star forwards when he is fit. I think, talking to Niall Cronin afterwards, he was a little bit disappointed in Wicklow. He thought they might be a bit stronger. Didn't think they really performed on the night. So I think he was acknowledging that it might be a little bit hard to judge based on this particular game. But yeah, he was happy enough overall, I think, but plenty to work on as well. We had a slow start and a slow start to the second half, and those sort of things would bite you against stronger opposition, I think.
Yeah, and Seamus, it's a bit of an awkward position for Kildare because it's only a 3-team group. Kildare will play Offaly next week, and from my understanding, it's only the top team from this group that will go through to the quarterfinals. So there's no room for any slip-ups against Offaly, and if there were to be any slip-ups, then obviously Offaly would know their fate would be in their hands when they play Wicklow in the final game. So Kildare really have to make sure they get their work done against Offaly next Wednesday. As I was saying, there should be good reasons for confidence with a lot of the performances, but a lot to be tidied up on as well, because that's now a really big game for Kildare.
Yeah, look, they'll know really well going into that, and we'll know from the time they left on Talker last night that the Offaly game, to keep your interest, at the forefront of your mind, and to be there at the top of the table after that 3-team group, it seems a bit unrealistic. You know what I mean? That you're only going to get the two games in the group, but yeah, I think Kildare, I said it earlier, I think they'll step up markedly. I think they're decent enough side, teething problems, for the want of a better word, last night, to get up and running. And I think that you'll see a better performance from them next week, because I think just they have a nice strength and depth, a nice balance across the, all lines, with pace and a bit of strength there. You know what I mean? So I think that's certainly something that they will look forward to. But I do agree that it is there's no margin for error come next Tuesday night or Wednesday night against Offaly.
Just to clarify on that though, just looking at the Leinster website, it is actually 2 go through to the quarterfinals, so possibly not quite as top team in Group 3 and all second place teams in groups qualify.
Sorry, apologies. Okay, sorry. Yeah,
so,
sorry. I was thinking yeah.
Well, I think
panic over that already at the quarterfinals. So
pretty much.
Yeah, I think maybe you did say that, Jared, that the fact that that maybe if you finish top, you would miss out on the quarterfinal, which would be a game less and probably a little bit longer to wait. So so from that point of view,
that's only groups 1 and 2 where the winners get into the semi-finals. So that wasn't that last year we had that situation. So I think either way we're going to be in a quarter-final by the looks of it.
Okay, so yeah, well, so it's not as important next week as Offaly, but still, obviously, Niall Cronin would like a win and a good performance to be heading into the quarterfinals. And it will be interesting to see actually Kildare playing in the quarterfinals because the last couple of years Kildare have topped the groups even at minor level as well under Niall Cronin, and then gone straight into the semi-finals and maybe waiting. So yeah, we'll see how that pans out anyway. But that game against Offaly at home, presumably in Mangard Park next Wednesday evening, April the 1st. And yeah, no, we're not joking. April the 1st, Kildare v Offaly in the next round of the Leinster Under-20 Championship. So, well, Seamus, if we were cold yesterday evening in Antoker, it was nothing compared to how cold we were 24 hours previously in O'Moore Park and Water in Portlaoise, because that was absolutely freezing and really tough conditions for the Kildare Miners as they began their Leinster Championship against Laois. A game that had a few ups and downs. The man there in the picture, Jack Riley, he ended up with 1-6 and played a key role in getting Kildare through. And in the end, it was a 6-point win, but I suppose Laois will look back to a missed penalty late in the game that could have altered the course of that game, but Kildare probably deserving of the win in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, you have to have sympathy for both sets of players and panels having to line out in what was just terrible conditions. The breeze that was blowing across the field, and then the rain that came in sheets at different passages of the game. But yeah, Kildare, I suppose, a little like the 20s last night. It was good in patches, sloppy in patches, but they'll be glad to have got out of Portlaoise. It's been a happy enough hunting ground for minor teams against Laois over the last number of years, and yeah, some good performances. You say no more than Jack Riley with 1-6, really well taken penalty in the opening half, a really good 2-pointer free off the left foot from the wrong side of the field as well, and yeah, they were good. We talked Greg Kelly at full forward had a really good game. I think they kicked 3 points, and Aidan Bergen, a brother of the famous Bergen family from Grange Nolven, chipped in with 3 points, both all from frees as well. But in saying that, he was well involved in the game, and some good performances throughout it. Cody Ryan in the middle of the field, Liam Meskel, I think, was a corner back. Jerry, he's a guy with unbelievable pace, and Philly Wolf had said to us prior to watching the game, this guy is just electric, and there was times he was nearly going too fast before he could get a pass or a kick away. But there was one, I suppose, funny moment in the game when it looked like he had popped the ball over the bar jar, and it came back off the post while their goalkeeper was gone around the back to get a second ball to restart. So just one of those moments from the game. But yeah, look, it'll be a happy for Kildare to get out of there with a win and get their season campaign up and running. But horrible evening. But they showed some good character, and I suppose we'd have to mention Jamie Wolf getting a run from son of our own Philly there that was on commentary with you for the senior games for Kildare, and good to see him getting a run out on Tuesday evening as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely a real proud occasion for families like that when they see the youngster pulling on a Kildare jersey for a championship game. Richard, I know you elected for the more warmer idea of watching at home on television, but what did you make of it? Seamus mentioned Liam Meskel there. He certainly caught the eye. I thought he was very almost Ollie Lyons-like in some of his breaks forward at pace, but I suppose the last Meskel that we had at minor level went on to Hollywood, so hopefully we might see a bit more Liam in a white jersey before he maybe departs for something like that. But obviously I don't think he's any relation anyway. He's a East Down club man, of course. The famous Paul was from Maynooth, so I'm not sure if there's any relationship there, but as I said, he bore more of a resemblance to Ollie Lyons than any other Kildare player I think we've seen.
Yeah, he was good, wasn't he? I was very taken with Jack Riley as well. I thought, lovely left foot, great finisher. His penalty was it might give Alex Burns some lessons maybe for the senior team. Sorry, Alex. Yeah, no, it was a somewhat. It's hard to tell sometimes on cover, but it seemed a reasonably pedestrian kind of game. I think I'm not sure how strong Laois were. Kildare always looked on top. Obviously, if the penalty had gone in, would have changed things significantly for the run-in, and in a way you would have liked to have seen how they'd have coped with that. But those challenges will come later on, and they're in a tough group, aren't they? They're in with Louth and Meath, so those challenges will come fairly quickly. You'd expect both Louth and Meath to be very strong again at this level. So the job was done. I wouldn't say it was overly impressive. It was they did fade at times, particularly at the start of the second half. Maybe that was a wind factor. couldn't quite tell which way the wind was going at times, but it's kind of good in a way to get a win in your first game, but have plenty to work on, I'd say, rather than think everything's fine and dandy. So, and I think they've got 2 weeks until their next game, I think, so they've plenty of time.
April 7th, yeah.
So, job done, and some good performances. So, let's be positive. It was good to get these 2 wins, just a few days. It was good to actually get back out and see a game fairly quickly after Sunday, but to get a couple of wins as well, boost the morale a bit in the county after everyone was a bit down at the weekend.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah. And as Richard said there, April 7th is the next game for the Kildare team against Meath away. I know we're running tight for time, Seamus. If you just have to take a call there, pop off there if you want. And Richard, I know you're very tight for time. So we'll just have a quick chat, Richard, if you don't mind, just about the hurlers just while Seamus departs there. Because obviously we spoke last week about the Kildare hurlers and heading down to Wexford for what from all intents and purposes really a dead rubber game for Kildare, given that they had done their work earlier in the earlier in the league season. We kind of speculated last week as to how Kildare would approach the game, both in terms of team selection and how they would play. In the end, it finished up a big win for Wexford there, 329 to 114. But I don't think Kildare will be overly disappointed with that. Obviously, they'll be overjoyed with the league season, and their attention now very quickly will turn to the Leinster Championship.
Yeah, I mean, I got it totally wrong in terms of how I suggested we might approach the game. I really thought we might go for it and try and, lay down a marker and, prove to ourselves again that we can live at the top table or close to the top table with the top 3 in this particular division. But, Brian Dowling obviously had injury issues to deal with and wanted to give lads minutes and, various other reasons for picking a slightly weaker side than, obviously, there were some non-first choices who got some game time down there. Still a little bit disappointed in a way, does that hand a bit of initiative to Wexford coming into the game against us in Newbridge in a few weeks' time, gives them a bit more confidence going into it. Hard to know really. It was probably a little bit less of a dead rubber for Wexford in the sense that, when Carlow were close to Dublin at halftime, Wexford might still have been, sniffing a chance for getting into that league final and getting promotion. So, they probably had a little bit more riding on it and that showed. But I think what it shows is Kildare really need to be at their absolute best in terms of intensity. And listening to Seamus on the commentary and Paddy Maher, it sounded like Kildare were a little bit off in terms of intensity and physicality compared to where they had been against, say, Clare or Antrim or Carlow even. And, when you're off like that against a team like Wexford in hurling, you can take the sort of beating that we took. I hope it doesn't dent confidence. I don't think it necessarily will. I think they'll see it for what it was. But just as a supporter, I'm a little bit disappointed because where does that leave us? We run Clare to 3 or 4 points, but we took some fairly big beatings against Dublin and Wexford. So are we still that far off the pace or not? I guess the Leinster Championship will show one way or the other. So, look, Brian Dowling has to do what he feels is right at the time. And, who am I to question Brian Dowling given what he's achieved with this team up to now? So, I think we just have to put this one behind us and move on to the championship fixture against them. And hopefully we'll get some, we'll have everyone in good health and be able to pick a pretty strong 15 for that one and bring the intensity that we brought to the last few games.
Yeah, I suppose, Seamus, that's the question now. Like, have Wexford got that psychological boost now heading into that Leinster Championship weekend, which, is, as we said, is on the same weekend as the football championship game on the 18th and 19th of April? Or, is Brian Flanagan maybe just not showing his full hand and just keeping something in reserve, and potentially Kildare will be playing possum and be waiting to spring a big surprise when Wexford arrive in Newbridge for that game?
Yeah, I think certainly from the point of view of, I think Kildare won't be the same team that lined out number one, I suppose, as we all know that. I mean, you can visit it probably as 5 or 6 changes from what lined out on Saturday evening. There was an opportunity, I suppose, to give guys a little bit of a break, guys that maybe had some injuries and guys who'd been on the panel and maybe not getting the amount of game time that they would have deserved. But I think taken from everything and reading between the lines, I think Kildare will be a different team come the 18th of April. I think there'll be a huge intensity, a huge appetite to, let people know that Kildare are in the Leinster Championship, but that's not taken from Wexford. I mean, they were massive on Saturday evening, and Ross Banville didn't start in the middle of the field, probably the one player who would be definitely their starting 15, but they certainly went full strength, laid down a marker, hit 329. But if you're going to give the likes of Lee Chin the room that he got throughout the evening and the impression that he made on the game, and he was only one of them, you're not going to get away with that at Leinster Championship. And I think it'll be a different game come, as I said, the 18th of April. I think Brian Dowling won't have lost a whole lot of sleep. I don't know whether he would have liked to have taken as big a beating as he did. I mean, 329 is a massive score to give away, but there were some positives. I think Evan O'Brien, as he is at corner back, put his hand up for a place come championship time. So Jerry Keegan hit 5 points from play, was really good again, as he always is and has been all year for Kildare. And yes, there was some good performances. Jack Sheridan got plenty of attention throughout the evening, as he always does. Colin McCabe was probably quiet by his own standards, but you'll see different players, I think, come the first round of the Leinster Championship. And I think that as disappointing as Wexford was, Kildare have learned some lessons that they wanted to learn, but also coming out of that dressing room in Cedar St. Conleth's Park, I would expect a totally different team, preparation, mentally, attitude, everything. I think it'll be, and hopefully, a far better performance.
Yeah, Richard, as well, like we have spoken at length about the achievements of the hurlers, but we couldn't let it, I suppose, go and let the league end on a bit of a low, because, I mean, overall, it's been an incredible league campaign for Kildare to have those 3 wins, to have them so convincingly, and to have secured safety, and Division 1B hurling with still a game to spare going into next season. It's a fantastic achievement, and it shapes up very nicely for the Leinster Championship, but that's obviously going to be a different test altogether. But to have Division 1B hurling again for next season, it's really encouraging for the future of Kildare hurling.
Oh, it is. It's massive, and you can't have asked for anything more out of the campaign, really, to have won the 3 games against the 3 teams beneath us. One of them away and down where we've struggled. And then to have beaten Antrim and Carlow so comprehensively in the 2 Newbridge games, and then run Clare to like 4 points in Newbridge as well. A Clare team who put up a 65 plus scoring difference overall and won all their games. So you really can't have hoped for anything more. And as you say, just consolidating that position, and it's kind of the corollary of the football situation I was talking about, which is that getting another year at this level will bring those players on again, whereas you'd question for the footballers whether playing in Division 3 is going to bring them on to the same degree as playing in Division 2, what I don't think it will. So yeah, a full kudos to the team and panel, like the work that's gone into that, and just even from a strength and conditioning side of things, and the physicality that they've brought to games, not diminishing the skill level either. And the confidence they've played their hurling with, full kudos to a great campaign from all concerned.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as I said, we'll be talking much more about the hurlers as we build up towards the Leinster Championship in a couple of weeks. Wexford will be visitors to Newbridge for that first game for Kildare in the Leinster Senior Championship for so long. So yeah, really something to look forward to now in the coming weeks for the Kildare hurlers, and they go there with great confidence. But we'll stick with hurling and move on to the under-20s. The man there in the picture, if you're watching on YouTube, was a very busy man, Charlie Carroll, because he was part of the Kildare hurlers who defeated Kerry in the Leinster Under-20 Championship as an outfielder. Of course, he was the goalkeeper then for the Under-20 footballers in the victory over Wicklow. But Seamus, you were at that match. A good win for Kildare against Kerry. I suppose the standout performer, Tom Byrne, but also Oren Byrne as well, scored 8 points from play. Tom Power, 6 points, including some frees. Tim Ryan also 4 points. And I suppose no coincidence that all those players have been in and around the Kildare senior panel this year and obviously hugely benefiting from that experience.
Yeah, I think was it 5 of that Michael Owens as well around the middle of the field. And Kerry can always, bring a huge intensity and a strong work rate when they come to play at minor under-20 level when they're in Kildare, and you wouldn't have expected anything any different. But Adrian Kinsella has that team. There's been a lot of work put into them over the last number of months. And I'd say that having that experience for the likes of the Tim Ryans and the Tom Powers, Michael Owens coming in from the senior panel, and the bit of game time that they would have got, especially Tim Ryan, who looks like, for all intents and purposes, he'd be pushing for a place on the senior team for the opening round of the championship against Wexford. So that's great to have it under 20 level. It gives great confidence to a panel and to a starting side. And Kildare hurled really well on Sunday afternoon. Difficult conditions again, although they have to give Hawkfield tremendous credit because it's always in good condition. And but they did well, and it was a good result at the end of the day, and sets them up nicely for this weekend again.
Yeah, and what a huge game that is now. Westmeath, the visitors to Mangard Park on Sunday afternoon. And for all intents and purposes, it's a shootout, a knockout tie for a place in the Tier 1. I think there's a secondary competition if whoever loses, but the winner will progress into the Tier 1 competition and will go into a group and be guaranteed 3 games against Kilkenny, Galway and Wexford. So a big prize for the winners on Sunday, and you'd hope that Kildare will be ready to grasp that opportunity.
Yeah, it's massive, and I suppose in the context of progression for Kildare hurling and keeping, with the seniors in Division 1B, that it's massively important, I think, for these lads to take the next step by beating Westmeath and playing their trade against those top teams, the Galways and Kilkenny and Wexfords, because you'll only improve. And as tough as those games might be on paper, Ger, it's where Kildare hurling wants to be, at the top table, and to step away from the likes of that lower tier of the competitions, and you're there, I suppose, on merit, and you have to work your way out of it. But it's a big game against Westmeath. I think Kildare may have played them earlier in the year, but it'll count for nothing once Sunday evening comes at around 4:00. And that game is part of a double header just after the ladies, so it's 2 really good entertaining games in Mangard Park on Sunday afternoon. And but you'd be hoping that Kildare will just have enough, because I think they have the hurlers, but Westmeath have been moving along nicely at underage as well, so it's set up nicely.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a nice way to spend a Sunday afternoon. If you're at a loose end, I know, Seamus, you'll be spending your afternoon in that way over those 2 games over in Mangard Park. So, 2 big games. But, 24 hours previous to that, unfortunately, the Kildare minor hurlers, Michael Riley there, midfielder, tussling against Meath there in that picture. They unfortunately lost to Meath, and it was a real kind of seesaw game. Kildare conceded goals inside the opening 30 seconds of both halves, but actually bounced back in either half really well. They were well ahead at the halftime break, 11 points to 1-6, despite conceding that goal. And they conceded a second goal, as I said, within 30 seconds of the throw in the second half, but again, responded really well and were 4 points clear heading into the final quarter. But Meath came back. But really the key moment of the game was a Kildare penalty inside the final 10 minutes. And unfortunately, Cúnog McAgon, who was the outstanding player on the field from a Kildare point of view, had scored 9 points. Unfortunately for him, his penalty was saved, and from there, Meath outscored Kildare by 4 points to 1 in the final couple of minutes, and eventually won by 3 points. But sport can be cruel, Seamus, because as I said, Cúnog, he was absolutely superb. His 9 points, 3 were from play. He's well able to win his own ball. He's a big, tall, young lad, and he was outstanding. And for him to be, unfortunately, the one that missed the penalty was a real cruel blow for him and Kildare. But yeah, as I think I said in the report, that'll be only a tiny blip in his career, because he looks to have a huge amount of potential, and he'll try and get back on the horse straight away, because Kildare Miners are up to Auckram now on Saturday afternoon through the back door in this championship, but they still have a chance to contest the Tier 1 championship if they can come through that test against Wicklow on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, it's in fairness to that young lad, the 9 points probably went to the back of his mind straight away, and he's probably, you beat yourself up for one mistake, but he's a young lad. He'll get over that, and he'll be probably all the stronger for it. But yeah, just disappointing from Kildare's point of view that it just didn't get over the line, and that probably penalty would have been enough to probably have seen that at that late stage of the game. But as you say, off to Auckram, off to Wicklow again this weekend, Ger, and drew the short straw, but certainly it'll be a good chance to get back on a winning path, and they'll be hoping that Kildare will have enough, because again, to be playing your trade at the top table in Tier 1, it's massive. So Kildare will certainly be looking to do that, and I know Richard had alluded to maybe a plethora of minor championship games that Kildare have lost over the last number of years, and you probably have to go back to 2024, probably 23 or 24, when Kildare got to the preliminary quarter final of the Leinster Minor Hurling Championship, and I'll always remember that game against Kilkenny. Adrian Kinsella was the manager that evening as well. Wonderful, wonderful game of hurling. They were, that's again, seeing Kildare playing Kilkenny in the likes of that type of a game is what these guys would, aspire to get to as well. So hopefully they can do it in Wicklow again, but on Saturday afternoon. But again, Wicklow won't be an easy to overcome, especially at home.
No, for sure, absolutely. But we wish that Kildare side the best of luck. So yeah, some big games there for the underage teams over the next few weeks, as the senior championship teams take a break. Looking forward to those senior championship games to come, I should say. But yeah, so best of luck to those Kildare teams, and of course we'll have plenty of coverage of them both on our Kildare Nationalist website and indeed in next Tuesday's paper as well. So yeah, we'll turn our attention now, just before we wrap up, to the club scene. Seamus, we'll start there with Division 1 and Selbridge with a couple of wins under their belt. I think you were at the Naas and St. Lawrence's game last Friday evening, as it were, and Naas ran out 6-point winners, and I think you were telling me all about Owen Doyle, still a leader in that Naas team, and it's more so even when the county players aren't around as well. He's the one shepherding what's overall a young side, but Lawrence is obviously missing some of their county players as well, the under 20 lads as well, but a good win in the end for Naas.
Yeah, look, if you want to, I suppose, if you're a young lad and you want to know how to play centre half back or in any back position, if you get yourself close to Owen Doyle and listen to him, the way he talks and directs operations, and still has that massive pace that he's always had from a centre half back position. And unfortunately, it's Naas's gain, I suppose, that he's playing all the time, and that he's not playing with Kildare, I suppose, anymore. But what a servant he had been, and a captain for Kildare down the years. But on Friday evening last, it was St. Lawrence's and Naas up in Old Grange. Lawrence's home fixture for them, as you say. James Donnelly made his return from injury, and he probably very unfortunate not to have been part of that under 20 side last night. But again, Senan Gallagher and Senan Murphy, who's out injured, and Rory Lawler and TJ Nolan missing from that side. And in fairness to Lawrence, they put it up to Naas for long periods, but Naas just saw them out in the end, and it was a good, entertaining game for their opening rounds of the league, having both sides missed out on the first round because of the weather conditions. But look at Naas showing their hand. Lawrence's have a tough game again this weekend, heading to Johnstown Bridge, I think it is. So they'll be looking to get points on the board nice and early, because how important that is. And I suppose you talk about points on the board, Milltown have started really well and are up to 4 points after their opening 2 games, and getting those is massive to try to keep your status in that Division 1, because it is tough.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Milltown are doing a Salons at the moment, because it was Salons last year who took the Division 1 football like a duck to water and ended up in the semi-finals. But Milltown have made a great start. Well, Salons obviously still having something of a hangover of their extended season. Last year have lost their opening 2 rounds as well. But great win for Johnstown Bridge as well against the Tide there. Always a seesaw team, but especially mentioned the 2 as well for the Newbridge Derby, which perhaps fittingly, given the occasion that it was when Morfield and Sarsfields played each other. Obviously, the sad news of Jerry Moran's passing at a broken 48 hours or so previous to that game, and Jerry Moran obviously hugely influential in Moorfield, but also around Newbridge as well. And it was fitting that it was Moorfield and Sarsfield playing in that first game following Jerry's passing, and probably fitting as well that it ended in a draw.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, at a lot has been said about Jerry over the last week or so, and he got a round of applause in Newbridge last weekend before the Loud match, and richly deserved. He was a massive Moorfield man, massive GEA man, and he drove underage for so long at county level when he was involved back in the day, and also in his own club in Moorfield. But he'll be sadly missed, and guys like Jerry don't come around too often, and Moorfield's, the influence that he had around the Moorfield club was massive. And I think Philly was telling us at the weekend that the size of the funeral, I think it was on Saturday morning, was just massive, and it was fitting send off for a wonderful man. But good game for both of those. You mentioned Johnstone Bridge, Jared. They'll probably be disappointed that they're not on full points, because having led by 6 at half time and had a goal opportunity just after half time, they were probably felt that they should have beaten Milltown in the opening game. Selbridge had a decent enough win over Raheens, and Raheens will be looking to get a couple of points on the board early enough as well. So Clane suffered a heavy enough defeat there, I think, was it to Maynooth? So they're on the back foot, I suppose, as well. So look, it's good to see it up and running. Hopefully the weather is going to pick up now, and there's some there'll be really some good games between now and championship time come for the clubs.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's Saturday evening, 5 p.m. I think the majority of games are played this weekend. We'll just throw our eye quickly over Division 2 there as well. Leixlip on top there with 3 points. They drew with Grange, and that was quite the result for Grange. As we mentioned last week, the long trip that was ahead of them on a Friday evening. So a great result there to come away with a 17 apiece draw. And we talked about the Castledermot and Round Terrace game last week that had been played on St. Patrick's Day. But then on the Friday evening, then 2 Mile House defeated Carra by 12 points to 1-7. Alan Wood defeated Carberry 113 to 111. Ellistown defeated Eadstown by 114 to 12, and Rathangan victorious over Confi 114 to 10 points. But already, Seamus, you can see there's quite a number of the teams have played 2 games, but as of yet, nobody has won both their opening games, which probably serves testament just to how competitive this division is going to be, and that's probably something that we'll see right throughout the duration of it. Yeah,
look, if you pulled any 2 teams out of the hat there to play each other, you'd find it very hard to predict the result. And I suppose you look at some of the teams that don't have the county contingent. I suppose Tommy Gill and Aaron O'Neill and Owen Cully missing from Carberry, so that's straight away. Like, I mean, Alan Woods would have been missing maybe some of the underage, the likes of Cunningham and Owen Bagnall, I think maybe, well, he's back playing as well. Yeah, Carra, another team who will be missing a couple of county players as well. So, that probably brings a bit of equality to some of the games that you'll see throughout the league campaign where guys are missing. But in saying that, Castledermot a good win over Towers at home. That's always a tough place to go to. But certainly, I suppose, pride of place for the weekend has to go to Grange, as you mentioned, to go to Leixlip and get that result and hit 17 points. They've stepped away from junior championship, having won the Kildare and Leinster, stepped up to Division 2 from Division 3, with seamlessly, I suppose, at the moment. So that's great for them to see them getting a point on the board, and they'll be a tough nut to crack, and whoever has to play them throughout the league.
Yeah, absolutely. But it has been a feature, I suppose, of the last couple of weeks that Brian Flanagan has been very encouraging in terms of letting players who haven't been in match day 26, or even sometimes who have been in match day 26, and let them back to their clubs. And he has intimated that players will be getting plenty of club football between now and Kildare's championship game against Offaly. So it could be a case that if you hop along to see any of the league games this weekend, that you could see many of the Kildare players back playing for their clubs for the next couple of weeks. But moving into Division 3 there, we spoke last week about Ballyteague and Ballyteague and Rathcoffey, I should say, who both recorded victories as we were recording last Thursday evening, and particularly that one for junior championship side, Rathcoffey over senior championship side, Clougharinco really caught the eye. And moving on then to Friday, then there were victories for Kilcock against Kevin's, 2-22 for Kilcock, 2-12 for St. Kevin's. Kill had a narrow win over Kilcullen, 1-7 to 8 points. Strafford had an even closer victory against Nurney. Two sides of O's have a great battle, and this game played on Saturday afternoon. It was Excuse me, it was Nurney at that point. I have to get Tommy to fix the fonts here. My eyes are going. It was a 17-16 win to Strafford there, as I look closer at it. And then Robertstown were victorious against Garvan, 118-112. But Seamus, I know you were in around Nolan's Butchers in Kilcullen there, and there was that defeat to Kill was the talk of Kilcullen Town there through the week, and Kill absolutely delighted with that one to get one over Kilcullen.
Yeah, look at no matter what club you are, I suppose you'll always fancy and your chances of results and wanting to get out of any particular division that you're in. And I suppose that was a really disappointing start from Kilcullen, because I know they've put a lot of work in early this year with a strong panel, and Niall Timmins and his backroom team, and the wide count I think was fairly high, so disappointing. But they'll learn from that. They'll come back again. There's a Kappa who'd been doing well at junior level, losing out again to Balliteague, and I suppose that bit of a step up there. Kilcock will be certainly looking to get back to Division 2 at least for this year, a senior side down there, and there's plenty of strength and depth, and if they can get the likes of Brendan Gibbons back for some of their league matches, they'll start picking up more points, and to have 2 from 2 already, and the same with Balliteague, and maybe Jimmy Hyland might start get a little bit of game time with them before the Kildare get into championship mode as well. But going back to that point, Jared, it's great to see, the Brian probably knows that the clubs depend on players as well, and it probably gives lads an opportunity maybe to come back even from injury, to get back on their feet as well. And I suppose that's a stepping stone, because senior league matches at any division are tough, and certainly are helpful in preparation for county panels as well. So, but yeah, look at them. Some good results. I think Jared Strafford did win 18-17 against
18. Sorry, yeah.
One by a point there, yeah. But so that was it. But Nurney again, they won their opening game, and they'll always be tough to beat, as they always are. They wouldn't have the biggest panel in the world, but they certainly bring a lot to the table when they go out to play. And they're on 2 points already. So yeah, it's tight enough there at the moment, in Division 3, and all to play for.
Yeah, and just lastly then into Division 4 there, Castle Mitchell, who I think benefited with the return of, I think James Harris got some game time and had a big tally to his name there. They defeated Ballykelly by 121-14 points. Great to see Ribbon back up and involved in the Division 4, but also recording a win in the opening round for them, 116-10 points against our Clock. Your own Suncroft side had a win over Kildangan there, 312-17, Seamus, and also Monasterevin against Ballymore in a game that could be very kind of indicative of what's to come in this league, and possibly even further ahead as well, looking down the road to a championship. But it was Monasterevin who came out on top there, 217-210 away against Ballymore. So a good win for Monasterevin there as well. So yeah, again, that one's shaping up nicely too.
Yeah, look at their Ballymore and Monasterevin are 2 sides that will certainly have aspirations of being in the top 4 of that group. When it breaks up after the opening 7 matches, and I suppose Suncroft will be no different. I did say that I suppose Kildangan was a potential banana skin. It was a local derby to an extent, but Suncroft will be happy to have got a win on the board and got out of that one. And Castle Mitchell, really good win over Ballykelly. James Harris, I think, with something like 10 points, and the difference in having somebody like him, makes a massive difference to Castle Mitchell. So it's going to be a tough enough division. As I say, by the time we get to it, Suncroft play Ballymore this weekend. That's probably a 4-pointer for both of those sides, because in the context of where they want to finish in that division, the likes of Ballymore, Monasterevin, Suncroft will be the ones, Castle Mitchell, who will be hoping that they can finish in the top end of it. But Jared, great to see Ribbon back and on the top of the table on scoring difference, because a very proud club down there, and they've had to do some work over the last year or 18 months, but they're back up and running, and great to see.
Yeah, I think I saw Kevin O'Shaughnessy as well has been a big part of the club. He had the privilege of playing with his son there as well, which is always a nice moment when it happens on the rare occasion that it does across the county as well. A lovely moment for any father to be lining out beside his son. So yeah, Seamus, I think with just the two of us, we'll just about wrap it up there. As I said, we're going to take a bit of a break now to recharge our batteries, but we will be back in the lead up to the championship, the Leinster Championship there for both the Kildare Senior Footballers and Hurlers, that the week ending 18th and 19th of April. But we couldn't go, Seamus, without, I suppose, mentioning the World Cup fever that's taking over the country. Hopefully we'll have this video out before Ireland take on Czechia this evening in Prague. We're recording it in the afternoon here, but yeah, the country, I suppose, has gone World Cup mad as well. And I suppose we're old enough, Seamus, to remember Italian 90 and the World Cup as well in 2002. But it's the whole generation who haven't probably experienced that sort of thing. And certainly the ones who have gone to Prague are enjoying themselves already. But it's a big, big game. And a win tonight would set up an unbelievable occasion then on Tuesday evening in the Aviva Stadium with Denmark to come and potentially World Cup qualifying on the line. But it's all going to be about getting the result tonight first off.
Yeah, look at whatever way it comes, whether it's extra time and penalties or whatever it takes to get over the line. But yeah, you just said it, Jerry. I suppose we can all remember the Italian 90s, and New York or America, was it in 2004?
94,
94, sorry, yeah. So, like, I mean, Italian 1994, European Championships in 88, we've all gone through that. And I suppose now to sit back and have a look and see the new and younger generation experience and that, and see the crowd that's in over in Prague at the moment, it's just electric over there. I'd say they're absolutely delighted to see such a crowd of Irish having arrived, and it'll be typical, I suppose, of a lot of places the guys will go to. There won't be a whole lot of tickets, but guys have gone to every corner of the earth, have had every excuse under the sun. And I suppose I said to you last night, some guy that was interviewed, that he said he had to use the Stephen Ireland excuse to get home to he was on his way back to Ireland, he said, but he was stopping off in Prague anyhow to get the Irish game in. But yeah, look, it's a massive evening. It's massive for the country. The price of oil and diesel and petrol and all will probably go to the back of everybody's minds before a couple of hours this evening. But it'd be great to be heading to Dublin on Tuesday evening with an opportunity to qualify for the World Cup. And I think that if Kildare is going to say, if Ireland can get over this evening, I think they'll certainly have enough in reserve in the Aviva on Tuesday night. And for those lucky enough to maybe have tickets secured, could be a very good night for Irish soccer.
Yeah, I think the ones in Prague, they are not too worried about the price of diesel. It's the price of beer over there in Prague. I think they're worried about an hour.
Yeah.
Even worried about it being sold out, considering there was queues there, and I think outside pubs at 9 a.m. this morning. So yeah, absolutely, as Irish fans always do, anywhere they go, enjoying themselves, and yeah, they'll get right behind the team tonight. So hopefully, maybe by the time you're watching this, Ireland have already qualified and we're already preparing for what's coming on Tuesday evening in the Aviva. But as I said, yeah, we leave it there. Seamus, thanks indeed to Richard, who was on earlier. Also, of course, Tommy and Pat, who are our usual contributors as well. As I said, we will recharge the batteries. We'll be back in a couple of weeks to look forward to those huge Leinster Championship ties for both the Kildare men and hurlers. But between now and then, enjoy your Kildare sport. There's plenty of it, whether it's GAA or any of the other sports around the county. Lots on as the clocks go back this weekend as well, and we start ramping up towards those lovely long summer evenings. But for now, Seamus, thanks a million, and we'll bid you farewell.